has has some idea what we're going to be doing today. Um, what we're doing today is very historical. Quakers from the beginning used to share with each other what uh, our leader shared, how he came to um, to be Christian, how he came to his enlightenment, and everybody has a different story. You know, we're not alike. And it's really interesting how other people interact with the divine, even using different language. My language is very strange to everybody else but me, uh, but it's very comfortable to me. I've been living with it forever. I don't seem to have changed since I was 5 years old. Uh, I think the same sorts of thoughts. Uh, there are changes. I mean, when I was 8, I began to think in terms of how is it that anything exists? Uh, how could a God exist? Um, how is it that I exist? All this philosophical stuff came in second grade as a result of my interaction with my peers and their thoughts, their ideas, which I'd never thought of before. And all of a sudden, these things became important that didn't exist in my life because they lived in other people's lives. So, here I am. Uh, I don't have the standard Quaker background. My mother was a theist, but uh, she didn't believe in the Bible in any sense. Uh, she thought that Christianity was a fraud, as did my father, who was an atheist. And so they decided not to teach me anything related in any way to religion because they were very different themselves. And they just decided to let me grow up to be me, not to be them, but me. And that was frustrating to me at times because I would have liked to have some guidance at times, especially when I got into interacting with girls in a different way as I grew up. So I just grew up. And then uh, when I went away to college, I went bad, according to my parents, because all of a sudden I became interested in Christianity. And, that isn't what they had expected from me at all. They had expected me to go the opposite way, to go the way they went, even though I was the first in my family, either side, to go to college. So they hadn't had this experience and didn't know what impact it might have on my life. So here I was a sophomore in college when I really began to consider these questions concerning life. Um, am I just the same as every other creature? Are creatures any different from biological robots? All these issues became very important to me all of a sudden because of my interaction with other people. On my own, I would never have thought of these things. but all of a sudden they became central to my life. And just at this time, they come up with this movie, Pinocchio. And so I went to see Pinocchio, and it was terrible. There I was on the screen. Uh, and what was the difference? You know, a robot, you push its buttons, but I had buttons too. My buttons were internal buttons, and I read advertising. I interacted with the world, and the world pushed my inner buttons. And was that any different from the buttons that robots had? And so I was very concerned as to whether or not I was a real person or just a robot. And so I looked around to see if there was anybody else who was dealing with these kinds of issues. And there was someone in my class, and we began to spend a lot of time together. And her thing was that you had to get out beyond the robot behavior. You needed to interact with God, because only God was independent. Only God was a real person. You could only be a real person in so much as you shared the life of God. So this is all new to me. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up in a meeting. But it gave me something to do very early in the morning, week after week, month after month, to deal with this issue. And one day I imagined a sheet of paper, and on one side, these are the advantages, possible advantages, to committing to serving God. And I had a long list. And then I went to the other side of the paper, mentally. It was a mental sheet of paper. And I put at the top the disadvantages to serving God. And all of a sudden, there was this voice clear as a bell, saying, that's not the way it works. Whoops, where did that come from? Well, it reminded me of something I had read, just as part of my own self-education. I had read the New Testament. And so I had read that you cannot serve two masters. And I understood the application to me being I couldn't serve myself and serve God. I didn't realize that God served me. It didn't occur to me at the time. But so there I was, stuck week after week, month after month, dealing with this issue. And finally, I decided I didn't have any choice. Maybe not be a good choice, but it was the only one I had. So I committed to the service of God. And I was shocked at the change it made, the difference it made. God began speaking to me more frequently. And his advice was always good, even though I didn't think much of it when I first heard it. One thing that happened to me was that I had pulled a muscle in my abdomen because I was working my way through college, and I was running this way, that way in class. And I had to run fast to get my work done so I could run to class. And I had done too much. And but it really didn't hurt, except my laugh. So all I had to do was keep from laughing, and I would be okay until summer. Then I could rest and feel it. And this voice said, "Little would you do that? I want you to pray about it." "Oh, I don't believe in praying about such things." "Pray about it." "Ah, it's not what I want to do." Finally, one evening, I was praying as usual before bed. He wouldn't let me sleep. I couldn't sleep. He kept me laughing, literally. He kept me laughing. And the pain kept me awake, and I couldn't sleep. And I said, "Well, okay." I said I would do what you said, and this is what you say. So I prayed about it, and bingo, I was asleep. In the morning, I woke up without any pain. And that similar things have happened to me several times since then. God is interested in me. God cares about me. What a ridiculous thing that God should care about me. So that's how I got started. And then I read everything I could about Christianity. I read about the Presbyterians, and I read about the Baptists, and I tried to figure out what I should do now that I'm a Christian. I can't just keep on living the way I've been living. And the only churches I knew about at the beginning were Baptist churches. And so I attended Baptist churches, but I couldn't become a member because I didn't believe their doctrine. I mean, the doctrine of the Trinity didn't even make sense to me. I couldn't get a handle on it at all, yet they all required it for membership. But again, the boss said, "I want you to apply for membership." "Oh, but I don't want to. I'm going to be rejected." He said, "Apply for membership." I applied for membership. They didn't ask me any questions about doctrine. They just accept me as a Christian. This happened to me 3 different churches. I don't know why. I think these people may have been educated, and they may have known how this doctrine got started, and they may have known that the guy who first proposed it said that it couldn't be required for membership in the church, because otherwise the church would be rejecting people whom God had accepted. So these people were educated, and they knew more than I did about everything. So they simply accepted me as a Christian, a fellow Christian, on the basis of the fact that I wanted to be. So simple, but it's so new to me. Everything was new to me. So that's how I got started. And then eventually I realized I had to be a Quaker. There wasn't any way I could be anything else. And I would search the city. I would drive around looking for a Quaker sign of some kind. And eventually I found one. And I parked in front of it, found out what the times of the meetings were, and I joined. So here I am. I'm a Quaker, as I was always intended to be, I believe. So that's my story. That's as unique as I am unique, and I think your stories are probably just as unique, and you should share them with us. Okay, Andrew?
Steve.
Steve.
Can I share my story?
Oh, please do.
Thank you. So my story, Ray, you started early in your life. That's how you started your story. My story, I'm starting going 6 or 7 years back. And this was towards the end of my teaching career. I became, and by the way, I have some notes written down. I'm just going to read those. Be easier for me than trying to ad lib. So, towards the end of my teaching career, I became interested in participating in a spiritual direction program. As a prerequisite to begin the spiritual direction program I was interested in, I needed to be in spiritual direction myself. To my good fortune, I found a spiritual director who was also a Quaker. And she and I have been together for 6 years or so. Unbeknownst to me, I was beginning a deep journey into discovering, as Lois had put it in the description, thy condition. I came to understand the impact of my childhood trauma and found myself moving through the light and shadow of my life, and have discovered that healing for me is not a linear type of thing, but it's more like an oval. I know that God is now and forever with me and within me in this journey. I also know how important it is for me to spend time alone with God every morning. I do prefer the very early morning hours where I can truly embrace the stillness and quiet before Philadelphia awakens. That's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there someone else who wants to share something? Just pretend you're among Quakers.
Ray, I have a question.
Okay, Rich.
Can you say a little more about what about Quakerism made you feel that you were a Quaker? And that sounded like you felt you were a Quaker when you discovered what Quakerism was. Could you say more about that?
Yeah, that's true. Once I found out what a Quaker was, I knew that I was born a Quaker. I just had Quaker attitudes. I had a Quaker approach to knowledge. Especially knowledge of the divine. And I had read all this stuff about all of the various types of Christianity, and I knew none of those fit. So nothing else fit. This fit. So the two factors together made it clear to me that that's just what I am. I'm a Quaker. Even if there were no such thing as a Quaker meeting, I would still be a Quaker. Someone else.
I'm going to speak. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Most of you don't know me because I have not been in Philadelphia for about, I don't know, 40 years now. I joined the Philadelphia Monthly Meeting probably around 1985. My wife and I were married in the meeting in 1981, I think it was. I actually spoke a couple of weeks ago because we were celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary, having been married in the meeting on February 21st, I think it was 1981. Anyhow, I became a Quaker as a result of my first wife. This was back in the 60s, and the Vietnam War was going on, and everybody was, working against the war and things like that. And she became very much involved with the Friends meeting in Pittsburgh. And so after we married, she basically dragged me away from the Catholic Church, I would say, because I had been raised Catholic. And I still know a lot about Catholicism. But anyhow, so after going to Friends meeting in Pittsburgh for quite some time, I began seeing the virtue of this kind of worship and this kind of basically self-directed, you might say, religion, rather than having somebody tell you what you have to do and what you're not supposed to do and all that sort of stuff, which is what a lot of religion is about. Anyhow, and so we lived in Pittsburgh for a short time, and then I got a job in Philadelphia, and we moved to Philadelphia. Well, we didn't really, I think we were just intimidated by the whole idea of being in a Quaker city. We never really attended meeting in Philadelphia. We moved out to Delaware County after a while and into Glen Olden, and we started attending meeting at the Media Friends meeting and the Swarthmore Friends meeting, and found a group in the Swarthmore Friends meeting who somehow, I guess you would say, found the meeting upstairs a little overwhelming, you might say. And they began meeting in the basement of the Friends meeting house in Swarthmore. And so we began meeting with that group. I don't know whether you think one of the people who was a member there, and I don't know whether anybody knows his name, but his name was Paul Mangelsdorf. He was probably one of the principal people there. And anyhow, so we lived there in Philadelphia, but we attended some meetings in media and in Swarthmore, but those were the only meetings we attended. Eventually we moved to, I got a job, I got laid off. I was working for Arco Chemical Company. They reduced their staff in the 70s and said, go find something else to do. And they gave us all kinds of help. And eventually, the only thing I could find was a postdoctoral fellowship in Amherst, Massachusetts. So we moved to Amherst, Massachusetts. And we actually then started bonding very closely with the meeting there in Western Massachusetts, which is called Mount Toby meeting. It's called Mount Toby meeting because it's under Mount Toby, and the nearest place there, which is not really quite near Mount Toby, is Bull Hill. And they just decided not to call it the Bull Hill Friends meeting for kind of obvious reasons. Anyhow, and so that became the place where I really became the most active in Friends, and started doing a lot of stuff with various young people and whatnot in that meeting. And there were many people there who often would come to Philadelphia for what's the place? Pendle Hill, for various activities in Pendle Hill. And so there was a young people group there who grew out of some activities which was going on in West Philadelphia. I don't remember the names of all the people, but there was a group in West Philadelphia at that time, which was called the Movement for a New Society. I don't know whether anybody has ever heard of that, but it was very much connected to a number of people who were in the Philadelphia meeting and whatnot. I can't remember their names anymore, but one of them was, I guess, the father of the previous headmaster of the Friends Select School. anyhow, he was very active in that. And there were other people whose names I can't remember right now who were very active in it. So that's sort of my background in Quakerism. And then we moved to Massachusetts, as I said, and became quite active in that meeting in terms of the young people and the activities, you might say, of founding groups, to set up group housing situations and all that sort of situations, which was similar to what was going on in the movement for New Society in West Philadelphia. I don't know, does anybody there have any recollection or know anything about that group? No, nobody does. I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Oh, I don't know anything. Newcomer to Philadelphia. Only been here 12 years.
Something, and I couldn't hear her. I think she's muted.
What year was that?
The movement for New Society was 1976 and thereabout.
Okay, no, I arrived in 1978. So, but I can remember there was a whole lot going on around the Episcopal Church in West Philadelphia.
But this
and they were all activists of one sort or another.
I've known about the movement for New Society for 30 years.
Okay.
I've known about this movement for 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the person who had a lot of involvement with that, I can't remember his name either, who kind of brought it to Massachusetts, you might say, because he would go and do lots of workshops at Pendle Hill and stuff like that. Mentally, his name may come to me, and people would probably know his name because he was a very active.
I know there were a lot of Quakers who were very active during the Vietnam War. I went for quite a few years to I live in Haddonfield, the Haddonfield meeting. There was Arlo Tatum, Lyle Tatum was at Haddonfield meeting at that stage. Lyle Tatum was very active all over the place. Arlo Tatum was, yeah. And they were all, so a lot of people in the meeting had become members because of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, exactly. And that was why my first wife became a member of a meeting, but now she's returned to the Episcopal Church. Anyhow,
right.
So, I think I'll quit here and just not say anymore.
Thank you very much.
I live in Columbia now. I attended some of the meeting here in Columbia for a while and found that I got on as a member of one of the committees for education, the education committee. And when I was expected to do all the work and had other members of the committee not really doing very much work, I got sort of
got mad.
Yeah, disenchanted, and I started then hanging out with the Buddhists.
Right.
But now it's been nice to be back to Philadelphia, although the only person I think that knows me there anymore is Craig Smith.
Oh, yes.
And the Uncafers know us. Tom and Jane know us. And but we were very close to Wilman and Carol Spawn. And,
yeah.
And they
yes.
Yeah.
She used to be a neighbor of ours.
Oh, was she? Yeah. Where did you live?
I've been living in Center City, Philadelphia for 20 years. Yeah. And
well,
she lived a couple blocks away.
They lived around 22nd and Cherry Street. That was where their house was. But then they moved into the place on Walnuts? Not Walnut Street. Yeah, I guess it's on Walnut Street. I think is where they moved into a big house, big building.
It's a big apartment house.
Yeah, right, right.
So, are we ready to wrap up, or are we ready
No, I
to
can, I
share with another person?
I have a story.
I figured you would.
I grew up in the Anglican church in Australia, where I was dragged when I was 9. So the local church was the St. Martin's Anglican Church. My mother came from Belfast, and through the kitchen window, we could see the monastery. There was a huge Catholic monastery, convent, church, school, which we could actually look at through the kitchen window. My mother loved to say when we had visitors, well, you know, we'll look down by the opposition, which I guess is a Belfast joke, right? Maybe no one will really get that. But my mother was actually descended from Quakers who moved to Ireland to get away from all the nonsense in the 1600s in England. So her last name was Hugh Pritchard, which, and the Hugh Pritchards had, original Hugh Pritchards had been the ones that had moved to Ireland, but they stopped being Quaker about 100 years ago, and I'm not quite sure why. So, but anyway, I was very much in the church, and we had a very active church fellowship and a very active Sunday school. And you could only join the church fellowship if you'd been confirmed. And I can remember running around, knocking on bishops' doors saying, you've got to confirm me. I want to go to church fellowship, which was every Friday night. And, you know, this was in Sydney. So we went to beaches, we had concerts, all kinds of things. And also I started teaching Sunday school when I was 14. And my highlight of teaching Sunday school was suddenly deciding all the kids needed to go to the zoo and I was going to take them. So I was 14. My youngest brother was 6. And these little boys were 4. And there were 4 of them. So the mothers quite happily dropped off the kids at the bus stop. And I had made a lunch to bring with me. So we went, I herded these little boys, 4 little boys and my brother and myself. We went on a bus to Circular Quay, and then we went on a ferry to get across the harbor. And then we went on another bus to get to the top of the zoo. And then we spent the whole day running around the zoo. I can't believe a mother would let me do that, but I guess Sydney was different in those days. Yeah, I can remember it was a wonderful day. And everyone survived, which was marvelous. Yeah. But when I was 16, Billy Graham decided that he didn't like the way the whole of Asia was becoming communist. And we were told, and so he had a crusade in Australia. And we were told before he came that this is domino theory. Vietnam's becoming communist, and when it becomes communist, this other country will fall, this other country will fall, this other country will fall, and Australia will become communist, and this is a terrible thing. So we need Billy Graham to come to Australia to make sure that this doesn't happen. So we had this massive crusade right across from the school, and I remember I had my exams. So once the exams ended, I went every day. So I went for half of the half of the crusades, and it was pretty amazing. There were like 20,000 people all in this great big stadium that was usually used for cricket. And it was interesting, and a whole lot of girls from fellowship, they would say, well, come and be saved. And all these girls were just, you know, walking off and going off and being saved. It's like, what do you mean you're going to be saved? What are you doing? What have you been doing all this time? Why are you going to church if you weren't saved? Or what's different? This American comes and tells you all this stuff. Yeah. So I remember two of the girls that went forward, within a year they were pregnant and they married, because that was 1960s, and they married their husbands, and it was pretty miserable. Yeah, I remember that very vividly. So how did I become a Quaker? Well, because of war. You're talking about Buddhist. No, as I said, I lived in Haddonfield, which was a Quaker town. It was founded by Quakers. The name Haddon was named after a British Quaker whose daughter came to the United States to claim the land. And we did have 2 Quaker meetings in Haddonfield until everyone decided that having a Hicksite and an Orthodox was a stupid idea. So they sold the Hicksite meeting to Acme, and friends still meet in the Orthodox meeting house. So I was going to the Episcopal Church, you know, good Anglican. And but on Saturdays, I'd seen an advertisement for Saturday nights, and all I saw on the advertisement was free childcare. Now, I had 3 small sons, and the father of the youngest one was living in Germany, so I was on my own. This was in 1990, and I really didn't care what was above the free childcare. I just saw the free childcare. But anyway, what it was a Buddhist lecture on Saturday nights. And it was organized by a Scottish lawyer who'd come to the United States and was miserable here. But while he was being miserable, he formed a Buddhist meditation group. And so for 1.5 years on Saturday nights, I was going into Haddonfield meeting to meditate and learn about Buddhist practices and Buddhist meditation, which was wonderful. And then during that time, the whole thing in the Middle East started blowing up, and then we started bombing them. And I was just so offended. Why are we killing people? It was just so obscene. And for the first time, my husband had come from Germany and bought me a television, which I didn't have. And so I actually saw Norman Schwarzkopf laughing about how funny it was that he was dropping a bomb on someone and killing them. So Sunday morning, I go to church, and I guess this was around January 15th, 1991. And the Anglican priest is saying, "Isn't that great? We are bombing Iraq, and it's just such a good thing." I can't remember his words exactly, but it was pretty appalling. And I went up to him after church, and I said, "How can it be good to be killing people?" And he said, "Oh, Iraqis aren't human." So I just grabbed my 3 sons and we walked out of there. And the next Sunday I showed up at Quaker meeting with not really understanding what was going on. And ever since then, I love Anglican hymns. I was never too keen on the creed, but I could do it. I like the ceremonies. I mean, today is Palm Sunday, and that Palm Sunday was always fun because, you got a little palm, and everyone's cheerful because, in a week it's the beginning of Passion Week. But it's interesting. I mean, after 30 years, I can understand what my ancestors were going through, and I'm feeling like I'm in touch with them. I'm feeling like they're talking to me. And so do I believe in God? Absolutely. Do I believe I am trained as a physiologist, and we have 5 senses. We don't know what senses we don't have. I have an empty room, but perhaps it isn't empty. Perhaps it's filled with things that I can't sense with any of my senses. And I realized long ago that, and this is something I've told people before, I believe there's no such thing as time. What there is decay. And what we try to do is figure out how decay happens. But with God, there's no time. So if you understand that time just doesn't exist, and all we're doing is watching things collapse, and we're trying to figure out how that's happening. But there's none of that. In God, there's Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I was there, I will be there. And how do I see God? I see God as a huge positive spirit in the universe. And some people call that love, which I think it is. Have I ever prayed and something happened? Yes. My last year in high school, my final exam, I was studying Latin and there were 12 girls in the Latin class. And I just wasn't that good at it. And there were two levels. There was first level 1, which was the smart people, and level 2. So I was actually the only girl in the level 2 class. And I won the prize for Latin of level 2 because I was the only one in the class. I like that. But anyway, before the Latin exam, I remember thinking, oh, I am cooked. I don't have a chance. And I said, okay, God, if you want me to pass Latin, you're going to have to show me the book that's going to, the page that's going to be on the exam. So what I'll do is you open the page and I will learn the translation in English. And you know what? That's what happened. That's how I passed Latin. So I'm thinking, okay, you did it. You came through for me. So that's my testimony.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else who would like to share
I'd like to ask
this
what
way?
page of Latin it was. I'm just curious. I studied Latin for 4 years in high school.
I had 5 years.
Well, I was only in high school for 4 years, so
Okay. Well, no, in Australia, we had 6 years of high school. Yeah. It sounded really smart to study Latin. I liked the concept of Latin, but I didn't much like the Gallic Wars and all this kind of nasty stuff that we were translating. I just was much more interested in English and history. So of course I studied science. Yeah.
but you don't remember what page of Latin it was anymore, what the text was.
No, I wish I did. I wish I did. Yeah.
Was it poetry?
No, it wouldn't have been it was probably one of the wars.
Oh. Okay.
It was probably Caesar's wars. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I read.
Yeah. He was a nasty person.
Yes, he was.
It's like, why are we learning this? Oh. Why are we remembering Caesar, who was just horrible? Yeah.
He was a model of success.
I guess so. Yeah.
He let his worst enemies live after defeating them in war, and they killed him in return.
Right.
My favorite part of learning Latin was Caesar's discussion that only barbarians wear pants, which in his view of the world, that was it.
That's terrific. Yeah.
Anyway,
I agree.
I would briefly tell my story of what happened. It actually starts back in 1964 during the Johnson Goldwater campaign. I was for Johnson. And my first contact with the AFSC was that they were organizing Get Out the Vote. I had a car. I had spent my entire income the previous summer on this horrible car that needed maintenance constantly. And I even had to import car parts from Germany to keep this silly thing going. But I took my car, they assigned me to go into the ghetto. here I am, this little white girl going into the ghetto. And they told me, whatever people need to get them to the polls, you do it. So I was knocking on doors. Some people wanted a ride, no problem. I drive them to the polls. I wait, they vote, I drive them home. I came to this family where the woman said, I need to go to the grocery store and I need you to cook dinner for me while I do that, and then I'll vote. All right. They said, whatever. So she left me in charge of her children and her kitchen. And I made dinner for that whole family. She didn't just go to the grocery store. She came home drunk, but I made sure she voted. So I didn't even ask her how she was going to vote. I assumed she lives in the ghetto. She's probably going to vote for Johnson. I never thought about that much afterwards. Then, about 50 years later or so, I wrote an article about one of my pets for one of the knockoffs of the Chicken Soup books. And the company, it's called Cup of Comfort, had a website where you could find out other people who also had stories in their books. And I found that one of our neighbors whom I'd never met also had a story in a different book. And I arranged a deal where the two of us could go to a bookstore and we would do signings of our books. And we started corresponding. And as part of our correspondence, I told her this story about my contact with AFSC. And she said, well, did you ever go to a Quaker meeting? And I said, no, I haven't. She said, well, try it. You might like it. And I went to Art Street and I just felt home there.
So you've been there 50 years.
No.
We haven't even been there, not even 10 years yet.
Oh, I see. It's more recent.
That's all very recent, but it's just that this experience getting out the vote with AFSC, doing things that nobody would think of doing today. But I guess the world was much more trustworthy at the time than it is today.
Like Sydney.
Yeah, you could take a bunch of 4-year-olds to the zoo. I could babysit the stranger's family and cook her dinner.
Yeah.
And that all led to going to Art Street and saying, yeah, I like it here.
Yeah. It's a very safe place. That's what I find. Very safe and calm too. Because I've been in a lot of different Quaker meetings in England, Scotland, Australia, New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey. Okay, that's about it. All of them unprogrammed. And what's interesting to me is it's the same everywhere. We're just very much welcomed in.
My first Quaker meeting was in Maryland, just above the tip of the District of Columbia.
Oh,
It's still there.
yeah, I've been to one in DC as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course I went in DC as well when I lived in DC.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because on Sundays too, occasionally I swoop into the Woodbrook meeting. Woodbrook is, well, they describe it as the English Pendle Hill, and it's in Birmingham, and some rich person gave it to the Quakers, I guess. So it's a retreat center. But they have a Woodbrook meeting for worship on Sundays at 2:30 till 3. And people come from all over the world. It's really, really very wonderful. And that's been the huge blessing of the pandemic, is we can connect in ways that we couldn't before. And I really enjoy that. Yes. Yeah.
We should have a pandemic more often.
Well, the world has changed. And for us to think that we're just going to go back and do whatever we did before, I mean, maybe that's folly.
No, there's no way to go back.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very happy meeting like this. What I'll probably do is when we can go back, I'll just add it on. So I'll still go into Arch Street, but I still want to meet remotely as well. I guess I'll just add more meetings. So instead of 2 a week, 3 or 4. Yeah.
I've gone to a lot of birthday parties this way.
Is that right? Yes.
Well, does anyone else want to speak, or should I turn off the record? Well, thank you, everyone. This has been an enjoyable session, and I will be downloading it from the web, turning it into an MP3 file, and uploading it to YouTube. I will mail out the link, email the link. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lois.
Thank you very much,
you, Ray.
Ray. Thank you, Lois.
Everyone.
Oh,
And
you're very
And I
welcome.
love your dog. We could see the dog on Eric's lap.
Yeah.
This is
Gee.
adorable. Adorable dog.
Absolutely needs a lap.
that's great. Well, I have my 3 of my children are around at the moment, and they're coming over because Angus was 40 on Thursday. So we're going to celebrate, I hope. We'll see.
Enjoy.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. No,
Woof, woof.
they think you're silly. They think you're silly. You too.